Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, I will be discussing some of my concerns on how I feel things have changed since COVID-19 until now. There are some things worthy of mention though before I start. First of all, as cliche as it sounds, I do not intend to offend or insult any specific groups of people by making this video. I'm also not revealing here my opinion on vaccination. I'm also not putting any blame on specific persons regarding the origin of COVID-19 either. I could also choose to talk about physical side effects that I've experienced after receiving both doses of the Pfizer vaccine, both short-term and long-term, but I won't either. I'll simply be discussing some trends that I've noticed since this all began. So here I go. I am a musician, a teacher, and currently an American college grad student. I am therefore speaking from an American standpoint, and possibly from the unique perspective of a musician and artist, whatever you may perceive that to be. These points I'm about to discuss, regardless, are important to me. Since COVID-19 began, I've noticed changes that have seemed to happen slowly yet steadily. Yes, of course, education has improved and continues to improve. Yes, our society has become more intelligent in general, but people have also become a lot more gullible and naive too. How and why is this happening? And what is it that we can do to prevent it? There seems to be an upward trend of narcissism in our generation. It seems that people born in the 90s onward are always focused on what's good for me, me, me. Well, I'm sorry to say it, but our community isn't always about ourselves as individuals. There's more to this world than just your me. It's important to appreciate the power of the media on today's generation. As our generation continues to veer away from cable, landlines, magazines, and radio, new communications like TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube seem to have taken over the world, and quite dominantly too. What used to be printed in books and newspapers is now on a video, on a screen in your hand, or from out of your pocket. Whereas people used to enjoy watching 2-hour football games, 2-hour movies, or long operas at the theater, we now seem to be interested in 5 to 10-second reels that just can't compare to the older entertainment media from before. Sadly, I would not be surprised if our generation's attention span is smaller than that of our grandparents or of previous generations, as we now seem to always be thinking in 5-second intervals these days for some reason that I can't quite put my finger on. Moreover, our social media now contains such large quantities of material that it is often misleading, dangerous, or even extreme in nature. What makes matters worse is how much we have normalized things that are, in reality, not normal. Travel and other life-changing moments are important to share with others, yes, but that's not exactly what I'm talking about here. And believe it or not, sensationalist YouTube artists who do extreme stunts and pranks is not necessarily what I mean either. What I'm trying to point out is something a little more serious. In TikTok Reels, Facebook Reels, and YouTube Shorts, there is so much AI and meta capability with today's technology that we can now make media such as deep fake videos and AI artwork. Deep fake media may seem real at first glance, but a deeper look into this media can more often than not reveal fake data at the core. These days, we depend on AI to think for us, to do brain work for us, and pretty soon we may even see AI drive our vehicles for us, although that particular trend hasn't become quite that popular yet. In previous decades, we had 2D animation and 2D artwork, for example, anime from Japan. That was so obviously hand-drawn and not real. Now, we are simply blurring the lines between fantasy and reality, and I believe it's making a lot of our viewers brain sick. Silicon tech has also affected how we view ourselves and how we view each other as human beings. We depend so much on filtering and editing software these days that we fail to appreciate pure talent and beauty that happens without any need for enhancement software. Most YouTube videos that I know of are filmed with the latest cameraware and lighting to best enhance video filming. And I can't stress enough how much auto-tune is used in music these days. Admittedly, it's hard to find people now who don't use photo filters, let alone people who don't have Facebook or Instagram. Furthermore, it's nearly impossible now to find anyone who doesn't depend on a cell phone in some way or another. Sadly, today's mainstream TV and internet media can play a negative role too. Not necessarily by fake news or misinformation, but maybe more through polarizing our society by stating only politically correct opinions. Believe me when I say, I understand how hard it is to study communications at a formal level in college and uni, as I've seen peers work hard in this field at my undergraduate campus firsthand. I know how important fact-checking and objectivity is for public media and reporting too. But I also recognize how much this obsession with political correctness can affect effective media reporting too. Reporters seem to be working harder than ever now to be politically correct, which to me is now an outdated concept and idea, since everything under the sun can still somehow be wrong these days. I cannot recall a time since 2020 when Democrats and Republicans, for example, have had decent conversations with each other without somehow framing the other and obsessing over generalizations. And neither have I seen either side of the spectrum 100% put politics aside for progress and cooperation. As a result, many times in current media, people desensitize themselves from the desire to understand, to learn, and to develop compassion. Instead, it has totally flipped into, why don't you understand me? Why won't you learn from me? And why don't you have compassion? Sad. Children, too, have been affected by our current desensitization trend. I've personally noticed when people, children in particular, can't seem to even recognize nonverbal cues or have lost the ability to read the air, so to speak. Some psych studies have shown that children who grow up without learning facial cue cognition can suffer from it later in life. I will say, even if it was 1 or 2 years of mask wearing, I do think that it has negatively affected the way people have learned to understand facial expressions in the past few years. This leads me to another point. People are becoming less and less creative these days. One of the trends of the 10s onwards and into the 20s, for example, has been recording viral dance videos on social media platforms like TikTok. My question is, however, why does it seem to always be the same routines again and again? Why does it seem to be the same songs again and again and again? When have people actually started making their own concepts instead of copying a trend? That goes to show that we now live in a world of one-mindedness. We have started losing our capacity to think independently, and our opinions are now gone with the wind. It's a new atmosphere, which I may probably politely call our new globalized media. We are becoming more and more like bioelastics in an unsure bio-blob, rather than sticking to our roles and vocations that we are called to play. We have been reinforcing a trend over and over again of mindless copying, instead of rewarding creativity, originality, and pure invention. We seem to no longer reward each other for novelty and progress. There is still a chance to change this, but it seems that the future of that sort of creativity is now bleak. In my experience, we Americans generally follow the latest fashion trends, the latest food trends, and even the latest travel trends. It's worth noting, though, that lately these trends have been starting to lean on the expensive side. I can't help but ask myself sometimes how many of us everyday Americans in this day and age can actually afford all of these things. I know I can't. And there are some trends worth following, and there are some worth ignoring too. Woke culture, for example, isn't all what it says it's worth. In my humble opinion, it's a false trend aimed to desensitize us from the real issues at hand. There's nothing awake about it. Real compassion doesn't even mention anything regarding race, ethnicity, or religion. It transcends those boundaries. Cancel culture is worth noting too. Whereas we can learn to respect other people's choices not to practice certain things in life, we choose to cancel people if they don't fit our criteria for what we think they should be. If someone chooses to identify with the LGBTQ plus community, for example, it's not my place to decide whether or not that person should have less opportunities than the rest of us. Neither is it my place to blame an entire group of people, such as the Jewish community, for starting conflicts abroad. It's not up to me to define my friend or my neighbor. It's his or her own choice to define his or her self-worth and to develop an audience rapport among his or her circle. It's my neighbor's job to define himself, not mine. We also need to remember that our true friendships in life aren't defined by social media. We aren't bound to defining our real social circles by revealing them on the internet. God only knows that friendships form in ways much deeper than that. In order to stop these kinds of cultural conflicts, we must immunize ourselves from these sorts of deathly moral panic. And there's no vaccine for it. I grew up learning to never believe rumors because rumors aren't always true. We need to remind ourselves that. And we need to remind ourselves that the internet, AI, and computer software doesn't always have all the answers to our questions. Computers were made by human beings, but human beings were made in the image of God. The answers to our questions lie within God, who dwells in our souls. The answers are in our own families and communities, in the people whom we see face to face, in reality. It's just my humble opinion, but I do think we need to start getting the American status quo straightened out again. We need to leave all the politics to the politicians, the farming to the farmers, and the dancing to the dancers, so to speak. Anytime we start stepping outside of these previously established and working social boundaries is when we unwittingly become insensitive, and frankly, we can possibly lose friends in the process of that too. In a society where mental health has now been at its worst, especially among young adults, we can't afford to make our COVID-19 decade worse than it already is. We need to start using our voices responsibly to build each other up instead of putting each other down. All of that starts with honesty, integrity, and for humanity's sake, just love. Thank you.